I 35M, grew up as the spare tire in my family. Not just metaphorically, I literally heard my parents use that phrase when they thought I wasn't listening. My brother Jason, 37M, was always the golden child, the star, the one who could do no wrong. From day one, it was crystal clear that I was Plan B, the backup son, the afterthought. Let me paint you a picture of what growing up was like. When I was 9, I broke my arm falling off my bike. Mom was annoyed she had to leave work early. Instead of taking me straight to the ER, she made me wait alone in the waiting room for 3 hours while she took Jason to his basketball practice. The nurse kept asking where my parents were. I just stared at the floor, too embarrassed to explain. Dad was worse in his own way. He had this talent for making cutting remarks that seemed casual but cut deep. Why can't you be more like your brother? Or, Jason never gives us this much trouble. Once, when I got an academic award at school, he actually said, "Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes," and laughed like it was the funniest joke ever. My teacher overheard and looked horrified. I just nodded and took it, like always. In high school, I brought home an honor roll certificate 3 quarters in a row. Was pretty excited, thinking maybe this time they'd care. Dad glanced at it and said, "Guess they're letting everyone on these days," then immediately asked if Jason was home from soccer practice yet. Cool moment. The crazy thing was, Jason knew exactly how the system worked, and he played it like a pro. He'd mess up, blame it on me, and our parents would back him every time, no questions asked. Once, I got banned from the family computer for breaking it. Turned out Jason had downloaded some sketchy games that crashed the hard drive. He laughed about it later when we were alone. "They always believe me," he said, not even trying to hide it. Only one person in our family ever gave a damn about me, my grandfather George. He wasn't the warm, fuzzy type, didn't say much, wasn't big on hugs or heart-to-hearts. But he noticed things, actually paid attention in a way no one else bothered to. When I was 13, trying to fix my bike with the wrong tools, he just appeared in our driveway with this old toolbox. "Thought you might need these," he said. No lecture about asking for help, no making a big deal about it. Just practical support. Another time, in freshman year, the school was doing this overnight trip to a science museum. Cost $95, not a fortune, but my parents said they'd already spent that activities budget on Jason's football camp. I didn't even bother arguing, just told my teacher I couldn't go. Grandpa found out somehow, probably overheard my mom talking. He slipped me an envelope with exactly $95 cash. "For school," was all he said. Didn't ask for thanks, didn't tell my parents, didn't make me feel like I owed him. The weirdest part is how normal it all seemed at the time. Like this was just my life, this was how families worked. It took me years to realize that wasn't actually how it's supposed to be. I spent most of my teenage years trying to stay invisible. Got a part-time job at 16 just to have an excuse to be gone, saved every penny. Had this calendar where I marked off days until graduation, not because I was excited about college or whatever, but because it meant I could finally get out of that house. Fast forward to now. I've built my own life, got a good job in IT project management, my own place. Limited contact with my parents, calls on birthdays and Christmas maybe, generic texts asking if I'm doing well, translation, making enough money to not need anything from them. Nothing really changed with them. I was still the extra, the afterthought, the box they checked off so they could say they had 2 kids. Then last year, everything flipped. And I mean everything. My grandfather died. Quiet funeral, no speeches, no fanfare, just a handful of relatives and a priest. My parents managed to make even that about Jason somehow, kept talking about how hard George's death was for him, even though Jason barely visited the old man twice a year. A week later, I got a call from the lawyer handling his estate. Asked me to come in for the reading of the will. Didn't think much of it at the time. Boy, was I in for a surprise. When I walked into that lawyer's office and saw my parents and Jason already sitting there, I knew something was up. Mom gave me that tight-lipped fake smile she reserves for public appearances. Dad didn't even look at me, just stared straight ahead. Jason was scrolling through his phone like he was bored out of his mind already. The lawyer didn't waste time with small talk. just shuffled some papers, adjusted his glasses, and went through some basic legal jargon that I barely paid attention to. Then he got to the actual will reading. To my grandson Ethan Michael Reynolds, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to my primary residence at 847 Maple Grove Lane, all bank accounts and investments, my vehicle, and all personal possessions contained within my home. That was it. Everything. The whole enchilada. Not split, not shared. The room went dead silent. I think we were all still processing what just happened. Mom was trying to figure out if this was some elaborate joke. Dad sat there frozen. Jason finally looked up from his phone and asked the lawyer to repeat what he'd just said. "This can't be right," Mom finally said. "There must be some mistake." The lawyer shook his head. "No mistake. The will was updated 6 months ago. Mr. Reynolds was very clear about his wishes." 6 months ago? Who advised him to make these changes? Mom demanded. The lawyer glanced at his notes. No one advised him, Mrs. Reynolds. He requested the meeting himself and was very clear about his intentions. He was old, Mom insisted. He wasn't thinking clearly. On the contrary, he was completely sound of mind. I've worked with him for 20 years. He knew exactly what he was doing. Jason spoke up. "This is bullshit. Grandpa wouldn't do this." The lawyer just slid a document across the table. His signature, witnessed by myself and my associate. Video recording of the signing is available if needed. Jason looked at me like this was somehow my fault, like I'd engineered this whole thing behind everyone's backs. Truth was, I was just as shocked as they were. The meeting wrapped up pretty quick after that. The lawyer gave me a folder with all the paperwork, deed to the house, account information, keys, everything. My parents didn't say a word as we left the office. That silence was scarier than yelling would have been. It lasted until we hit the parking lot. Then Dad turned to me. "You know what the right thing to do is," he said. It wasn't a question. Like there was only one possible interpretation of what had just happened. He kept going. "The fair thing would be to split it. Jason is the older brother. He was closer to your grandfather." Which was complete BS. I was the one who brought Grandpa groceries every week. I showed up when he had that fall 2 years back and needed someone to take him to the doctor. I fixed things around his house when they broke. Jason only showed his face on holidays, and only when food or gifts were involved. "We'll discuss this at home," Mom said, giving me a look that used to scare me as a kid. "As a family." I nodded, not committing to anything. We all drove home separately. I needed time to think anyway. Walking into my apartment that night, I kept turning it over in my head. Why would Grandpa do this? Why leave everything to me and nothing to anyone else? It didn't make sense. Sure, we got along, but this was extreme. This was the kind of thing that tears families apart. Though to be fair, our family wasn't exactly close-knit to begin with. I spent that night going through the paperwork. The house was worth around $280,000, not a mansion or anything, but a solid 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. The savings and investments added up to another $160,000. The car was a 2016 Toyota that had been well maintained. All told, it was way more than I'd ever expected to have at 35. The next morning, the texts started. "Mom, we need to talk about yesterday." "Dad, call me ASAP." "Jason, WTF man." I ignored them all. Needed more time to process this whole situation. It was Saturday, so I drove over to Grandpa's house. My house now, I guess. Weird thought. Everything looked exactly the same as the last time I'd visited him, about 2 weeks before he died. Same furniture, same photos on the walls, same coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter. I walked through each room slowly, seeing it all with new eyes. This place that had always been a refuge was now mine. All the times I'd escaped here when home got too tense, all the quiet afternoons helping Grandpa with projects or just sitting reading while he watched his shows, it felt right being here. But also empty. My phone kept buzzing. Ignored it. Whatever storm was brewing, I wasn't ready to face it yet. Over the next few weeks, my family launched what I can only call a full-scale pressure campaign. They started slow, strategic. Texts, voicemails, little reminders about how family sticks together, like they'd ever stuck by me before. Mom's first approach was to play the sad, confused parent. "We just want to understand what happened, Ethan." "Sure you do." Same people who couldn't be bothered to call when I had surgery last year were suddenly worried about me. Funny how money creates instant concern. Dad tried a different angle. Mr. Businessman decided to appeal to my sense of legacy and family heritage. Called me one night going on about how Reynolds men have always treated each other with respect and how this was about keeping the family intact. Respect only seemed to flow in one direction in our family. Mom started texting daily, sometimes twice. She'd switch between guilt trips and weird attempts at nostalgia. She even had the nerve to bring up how much they'd sacrificed for me over the years. "We gave you everything, Ethan. Like basic food and shelter was some huge favor they'd done me. Last I checked, that was literally the minimum legal requirement for having a kid." Then Dad took a different approach. Showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, all smiles and fake concern. Then casually mentioned how they were planning to help Jason with a down payment on a house, and this inheritance would really make that easier. When I didn't take the bait, his whole face changed. Dropped the act completely. "This isn't what George would have wanted," he said, his voice hard. "He'd be disappointed in your selfishness. Rich coming from the guy who visited his own father maybe twice a year tops, and only when he needed something." Jason was the worst of all. He actually posted photos of himself with Grandpa on social media, acting devastated. Tagging it with stuff like "missing you every day" and "your favorite grandson." Pure performance. This is the same guy who complained about having to visit Grandpa on Christmas because it cut into his party time. Then he'd text me private messages like, "You know I'm the one who should have that house. Don't be a jerk." And my personal favorite, "You must have manipulated him somehow. No way he'd pick you over me if he was thinking straight." After 3 weeks of guilt tripping, gaslighting, and shameless begging, I did the one thing they never expected. I cut them off completely. Blocked their numbers, removed them from social media, changed the locks on Grandpa's house. Didn't send an announcement, no grand exit. Just silence. They went nuts, of course. But those first couple months in Grandpa's house were peaceful. Quiet. I fixed up the place slowly, working on it every weekend. No pressure, no one breathing down my neck. I got a promotion at work. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win anyone's approval. I was just living. But if there's one thing I learned about my family over the years, it's that they don't give up when they're losing. They wait. They calculate. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out just how far they were willing to go. And in the process, discover a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. I came home from work one evening, absolutely beat from a 10-hour shift, just wanting to chill. Instead, I found 3 familiar faces waiting on the front porch of what was now my house. My parents and Jason. I didn't even make it up the steps before Mom started in, arms crossed, that strange smile that always meant trouble. She called me a sweetheart, like we were picking up a Sunday brunch conversation. But the 4th person was new, a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a leather portfolio. Lawyer vibes all over her. She said she was here to mediate a discussion regarding the estate. No one said the word contest yet, but that was obviously where this was headed. Jason didn't bother pretending to be civil. He leaned against the railing like he already owned the place, barely glancing at me as I approached. He wasn't just here to support them, he fully believed the inheritance was his. He'd been raised to think the world owed him everything, and no one had ever corrected him. "You've been milking this long enough," he said, that familiar condescending tone in his voice. "You barely even saw Grandpa toward the end." Mom jumped in, calling it a misunderstanding, said Grandpa must have been confused when he made the will. Dad stayed quiet until the end, he only speaks when he thinks it'll land. Told me to think about what your grandfather would have wanted, like the will wasn't signed, notarized, and delivered under full legal clarity. I didn't engage. No argument, no back and forth. I told them there was nothing to discuss, walked to the door, and stepped inside without another word. They stayed out there for a few minutes. I could hear Jason complaining, probably about how ungrateful I was. Then tires on gravel. Gone. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from stress, weirdly enough. Just clarity. It was never about fairness. It wasn't grief. They couldn't stand that I had something they couldn't control. And this wasn't over. This was just the opening move. The envelope came 3 days later. Certified mail, law firm letterhead. No surprises, just confirmation, my parents and Jason were officially contesting the will. But they had no idea what I was about to discover in Grandpa George's old office. Something that would turn their whole world upside down. Update 1, things have escalated faster than I expected, and I've discovered something that changes everything. After receiving that certified letter about contesting the will, my parents started playing dirty. They began spreading rumors throughout our extended family that I had been manipulating Grandpa George in his final months. Said I'd isolated him, made him paranoid about the family. Even suggested I might have been stealing from him while he was alive. My aunt called me in tears, saying Mom had told her I was having some kind of mental breakdown, making dangerous decisions. They even contacted my workplace anonymously, suggesting I might be emotionally unstable. Thankfully, my boss knows me better than that. But here's where it gets interesting. Last weekend, I was going through Grandpa's old office, organizing papers and scanning documents. Then I found a locked drawer at the bottom of his filing cabinet. The key was taped under the drawer itself, classic old man move. Inside was a single manila folder. No label. First thing I pulled out was a letter, handwritten, no date. Just my name at the top. Ethan, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and there's something you deserve to know. Below the letter was a DNA test. Real, official-looking lab report. 2 names on it, his and mine. Paternal match. I had to read it 3 times before it stopped looking fake. The letter explained everything. Mid-60s, he got involved with a younger woman. She ended up pregnant and didn't want to raise a kid alone. He didn't want to wreck his reputation by admitting to a late-life affair. So he went to his son, my dad, and offered a deal. Raise the kid, keep it quiet, and in return, you'll be taken care of later. It fell apart fast. My parents resented me from day one. My mom never wanted me there in the first place. My dad stuck to the deal only because he thought it would pay off. Jason, of course, was treated like royalty. I was just the silent cost of a bad family trade. George admitted he stayed distant because he thought giving me a family, even a fake one, was better than raising me alone. Said he knew by the time I was a kid that it was a mistake, but by then it was too late. He wrote that he watched how they treated me over the years. Said he thought about stepping in more than once but didn't. Not until the end. Everything I gave you in the will, I gave it to my son. The only one in this family who didn't lie, steal, or expect something for nothing. That was the last line. Things started lining up in my head. Why my parents were always cold. Why they treated me like a burden. Why George was always there in small ways, checking in, helping out, covering for things without ever drawing attention. That weird comment my mom made once during a fight with my dad, he's more your father's problem than yours anyway. I'd thought she meant I was too much like my grandfather. Turns out she meant I was literally his problem. I was the living, breathing evidence of something they wanted to forget. Something they'd been paid to deal with. And the inheritance wasn't just George playing favorites. It wasn't even really about money. It was the only way he could finally acknowledge me as his son without causing a scandal. It was his last chance to make things right. I made copies of the DNA test and the letter, kept the originals locked up safe. I haven't told anyone yet, not even my lawyer. I need time to think, to plan my next move carefully. The hearing is in 2 weeks. That's when they'll learn exactly what their lies have cost them. They want a legal battle? Fine. Let's see how well their story holds up when the truth comes out. All of it. I'll update again after the hearing. Something tells me it's going to be interesting. Update 2, the hearing was yesterday. To say it went nuclear would be an understatement. My parents and Jason were already there when I arrived with my lawyer, Janet. Mom didn't even look at me. Dad gave me that same disgusted expression he always used. Jason looked offended by my mere existence. Their lawyer started with the same routine they'd been pushing for weeks, that the will was tampered with, that I had manipulated George, that he hadn't been of sound mind when he made the changes. Janet didn't waste time. She brought out the certified will, the signatures, the video footage from the signing meeting that confirmed George was clear, sharp, and deliberate about everything he was doing. She brought out the financial history, the unpaid loans, the dependency patterns, the fact that George had already reduced support for the rest of the family before changing the will. Then she dropped the envelope. Your Honor, we have evidence that fundamentally changes the nature of this case, Janet said, her voice steady. The will didn't just go to a random grandson. It went to Mr. Reynolds' actual son. My mom shifted in her seat. My dad stared straight ahead. Jason looked stunned, then he looked at me, and I could see it hit him. This wasn't just about money anymore. He'd spent his whole life thinking I was beneath him, a spare, and now he had to sit there and listen to a court confirm that I had more claim to the Reynolds name than he ever did. Their lawyer tried to recover, claimed the DNA test was irrelevant to the case. But the judge wasn't having it. He asked my parents directly if they were aware of this paternity situation. My dad's face said it all. He knew. He'd always known. The judge didn't say much after that. He didn't have to. Case closed. Just a final legal stamp that said, officially, they lost. They walked out without a word. I stayed behind to sign a few final documents, then left through a different exit. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. This morning, they showed up at my door. But this time, they looked like hell. Just my parents, no Jason. I was outside working on the garden when their car pulled into the driveway. They walked up without asking. No small talk, no fake smiles this time. Mom was doing most of the talking. Bills, debt, no one left. Jason bailed, of course he did. They were going through a rough time. My dad just stood there looking like someone kicked him in the gut, which for once wasn't my problem. Apparently, Jason had dipped a couple months ago, moved out, blocked them everywhere, left them with a bunch of debt. Dad chimed in halfway through, said they were in a tough spot and figured I might be able to help. No apology. They weren't here to fix anything, just to see if I'd play savior now that their golden child walked out. I let them talk. I didn't say much. I finally said, so now you're here for the backup plan. That's not fair, Ethan, Mom said, her voice cracking. We're still your parents, we raised you. No, I said simply. George raised me. You just housed me. The silence stretched between us. 25 years of pretending, lying, cold indifference, all compressed into that single moment. We have nowhere else to go, my dad finally said, his pride visibly crumbling. Jason took everything and left. We're your family. The only one you have. The man who had watched me grow up knowing I wasn't his son, who had treated me like garbage, a burden, a mistake. No, I said. You're not my family. You never were. I told them I wasn't interested in helping them clean up a mess they spent years building. I reminded them they made it very clear who mattered in the family. That's the team they picked, and now that he's gone, it's not my job to step in. They stood there and didn't know what to say. My dad just kind of stared like he was waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. I told them I had stuff to do and went back to my gardening. They stood there for another minute, then left. Haven't seen or heard from them since. So, that's how it ended. They came back not because they wanted to make things right, but because they ran out of options and I was supposed to be the fallback plan again. Didn't happen. Now it's just me, the house, and peace and quiet. No more trying to prove anything, no more dealing with people who only show up when they need something. They picked their side a long time ago. Now they can live with that choice. And I'm good right where I am. Update 3, Karma hit like a freight train this month. Remember Jason, my brother, who vanished with his parents' money? His face was all over the local news last week, former finance manager arrested in $2.3 million embezzlement scheme. Not only had he been stealing from client accounts for years, but he tried to blame it all on his assistant, who turned out to be secretly recording their meetings for months. The footage of him bragging about how he'd never get caught is now evidence in his trial. But here's the real kicker, during the investigation, they uncovered my parents' own schemes. Turns out Dad's successful real estate business was built on fake investment properties and forged documents. Mom was laundering money through her charity foundation, using donations meant for sick kids to fund their luxury lifestyle. The same people they spent decades looking down on are now watching them get hauled into court. Their precious country club membership? Revoked. Their social circle? Ghost town. Even their lawyer dropped them after bounced checks. Jason's facing 15 to 20 years. His wife divorced him, took everything, and is writing a tell-all book about the Reynolds family scandal. My parents are selling their mansion to avoid bankruptcy, and rumor has it they're moving into a one-bedroom apartment in the bad part of town. Meanwhile, life's gotten surprisingly good. I'm now heading my company's cybersecurity division, protecting others from financial fraud. The irony isn't lost on me. That house George left me? Renovated it completely, turned his old office into a home gym. Even started a scholarship fund in his name for kids from tough family situations. Found a real family too, not blood, but better. My neighbors have become the support system I never had. Weekly dinners, home projects, actual genuine care for each other. You know, what family is supposed to be. Last week, I got an unexpected package. Jason's ex-wife found George's old journals while clearing out their house. Turns out he'd been planning this revenge for years, documenting every scheme, every lie, every manipulative move they made. He knew exactly what they were, and his final move was perfect: give everything to me, knowing it would trigger their greed and eventually expose all their lies. The last entry read, "To Ethan, they thought you were the spare tire. But you were always the only one worthy of the Reynolds name." George's last gift wasn't just the inheritance. It was justice, served cold and perfect. Sometimes the happy ending isn't what you expected. Sometimes it's better.